Welcome back, coders. In this episode, we're going to be finishing testing what we created in our last episode. We're going to be sending requests for images to the OpenAI Image Generations API, and I'm going to be giving you some ideas on where we can take this library or if we can extract something useful from it. All right, so get comfortable and let's code. Okay, let's start dissecting the new files we've created. The idea is exactly the same. We are going to query our API to get the options so that we can present them to the user. With the response, we're going to build a markup that will present in the front end, and we'll just display it. In this case, in the previous one, we had the dimensions, response formats, styles, qualities that came from the documentation from the OpenAI images API. In this case, we're going to take a look at dimensions. So the dimensions now do take input. So we give it a model. And the response we're going to get is for this specific model, which dimensions are permitted. So we're going to take a look at the dimensions resource. I think I haven't addressed the structure I'm following here. Whenever you see a package that is named boundary, that means that this package is an endpoint. When you see something that is a control, that means it contains something that either calls an external service or calls my database. And then if you see something called entity, this is the model that has all the data that we're sending from the boundary to the control to the user to the persistence layer. Okay, so now that we have looked at how we're getting the model, we're going to take a look at the endpoint that receives the model. And if the model is the model DALI 2, this is also an enum that we've created. It's done exactly the same as the response formats we have seen before. If it's DALI 2, we're going to take the permitted image sizes for DALI 2. We're going to stream them to the output, and we have a list of the name of the model and the value that is the representation in our system. In the case of DALI 2, we would have the image sizes for DALI 2, and this is also an enum. From the documentation, we saw that DALI 2 supports 256 by 256, 512 by 512, and 1024 by 1024. In the case of DALI 3, we have 1024 by 1024, 1792 by 1024, and 1024 by 1792. We saw that when we were looking at the documentation for pricing. When we receive the dimensions, we also dispatch an event with those options. And here we have the dimensions event, the same way we had the models, the response formats, generations, etc. I have completed this with the full model. So in this case, we have formats, models, the number of images, the sizes of the images, the quality, the styles, the textual prompt we're going to send for the API. And at first we have some dummy results. Well, not dummy because we have received those images at some point, but I'm just saving them here. In this case, it's a few images that are local to the application. Some responses we've received from the real calls to the API, and these are in base64 coded JSON. These are all the event listeners for all the events. So as I said, we have the call that I showed at the beginning, the response formats, we have dimensions, we have all the models. So in case there's DALI 5, DALI 6, we're going to receive the models in this way. The qualities of the images, the styles of the images, most of them receive the model, and then we get a set of options. For custom elements, we can have attributes, and if those attributes change, we can be notified each time the attribute changes. So that's why I created this static function that registers the attributes I'm interested in, and these attributes are the same as in the beginning. When the attribute changes, I get the old value and the new value, and what I'm doing right now is just taking the attribute and setting the new value. The render function is now a bit more elaborate. We're looking for the formats for the models. For this model, we're going to get dimensions, qualities, styles, and then we're going to start building the markup for each and every one of them. We also have certain validations. In the case of if it's DALL-E 3, we can only request one image at a time. And for DALL-E 2, we can have a range from 1 to 10. And this is building that range so that it's compliant with the documentation. If we can only request one image, I'm disabling the range selector. And I have added a few more styles for each and every one of the field sets and components. And in the case of the text area, if the model is DALL-E 2, we can only accept 1,000 characters. And if it's DALL-E 3, we can accept 4,000. I'm making use of the @change hook for lit HTML. This gives me a way to call this function every time this input changes. The same thing happens with certain buttons. In this case, when the button is @clicked, then we're going to handle the change in that input. And I'm building the response formats, the models, the dimensions, each quality for each model, the styles of the generated images, and at the end I also have a results field. In this case, when I call the API and receive a result, I'm going to parse it and see if it's a URL or a JSON. And if it's a URL, I'm just going to set the source for the placeholder. And if it's a base64 encoded JSON, I'm going to create a data URI with that content. These are all the model changes with the @change hook from lit HTML. And to send the form, what I'm doing is getting the form data by getting all the fields. When you get all the fields, what I'm doing is taking the form, taking all the inputs and text areas. I'm filtering out checkboxes, radius, and buttons. And then setting this as a JSON object. Here I can choose whether I want mocked images so that I don't spend real money. I created a mocked endpoint that will return the same image all the time. Or if I want the real call, I can switch it to OpenAI and have the real call be made. To make this call, I'm going to show you the images service. This makes use of the register RestClient feature of Microprofile. What I'm doing is just describing the interface that OpenAI uses. In this case, I have an endpoint, generations. So if I call v1/images/generations, I can make a call to the DALL-E 2 generation service or DALL-E 3 generation service. And I'm adding the authorization header here. This is where I send my API key, and this API key is this method. I'm just looking for the config provider, reading the properties, and looking for the OpenAI API key, and I'm returning this as a bearer token. So every time I make a call to this interface, Microprofile will create a client that is going to be calling the URL I tell it with this header and with the parameters I sent. I'm also registering providers, for example, for Jackson, so that I can take this object, transform it to JSON, and send it to the OpenAI API. And when I get a response in JSON. It also transforms the response into something that I can work with. In this case, I have a create image response. It extends a request error. If I have any errors, it will come here as a code, message, param, or type. And if there's no error, I should get when it was created and a list of images called data. So as you can see, it's very simple. And let's take a look at how it functions. Okay, so let's start deploying this and see what we get. Once this deploys, we can go over each part. In this case, I'm going to also explain a little bit of how the mocked endpoints work. While this is deploying, I'm going to show you. I have a mocked endpoint for the generation resource. This has two endpoints. If you call it with the model to generate a DALL-E 2 image, then we're going to be returning a list of images. And this list of images is comprised of two static images that is in the resources folder that are base64 encoded data URIs. And also we're going to get a few random photos, 3 photos from Lorem Pixum, so that it's a bit more dynamic. If you call the real endpoint, then it's v1/images instead of mocked. And here I'm injecting the REST client images service. This is just the interface. And I'm calling each one independently. For DALL-E 2, you could do the authorization manually here, but since I already placed it inside the API, then I have no need to do it manually. I'll let the Microprofile RestClient do its thing. So this images service, even though it's an interface, then it will create an object of that interface that can communicate with the OpenAI API. Okay, this seems to be ready. Let's take a look at how the final product works. In this case, every time I change one of these inputs, a call might be made to get the proper set of other inputs. So if I change the model, for example, I might get different dimensions, different styles, different qualities, and they're appropriate for each model. So DALL-E 2 accepts dimensions and a number of images. DALL-E 3 accepts other dimensions, but it also accepts quality, style, and I can request the response be in either a URL format or base64 encoded JSON. The same thing happens with the input. When I change the model, the input takes different set of, it has a different constraint on the length of the prompt. So the same happens for the range of the number of images. For DALL-E 2, you can take up to 10 images. But since DALL-E 3 only gives you one image, it makes no sense for you to provide an input for the user if the input is fixed. These are the images that are static that we have received before and have made part of the app. This was the last one. This one was created using DALL-E 3 with a vivid style, and I think it was HD quality. You can see also the prompt I used to create this image. And to test it, let's try to create the same one. And let's try to see if we are using the mocked endpoint or the real one. Okay, we made the call and I don't see anything. Let's look at the response. Okay, it seems we're getting something. Let's see if we got the response we wanted. Oh, here it is. So it's probably down here. And let's see if we got that response as we expected. Okay, so yeah, here's the data. It seems we didn't display the image. Oh no, we do. We have it as the first one. So here's the first one. So this is using DALL-E 2 with large images. And let's try to do, no, let me just save this image. And yeah, that's the one. Let me just save image as, and I'm just going to save it here. Let's go back. Now let's choose DALL-E 3, HD, vivid. That's fine. Let's do it again and wait for the response. I think I'm going to add also a spinner or something that lets you know that the request is in flight. Okay, so here it is. Okay, we got a new image, and let's try to see if we can download this one as well. This looks good. Yeah. All right, same thing. Save it, go back, and that's it. So as you can see, this is working. I'm going to start making the API more complete. I'm going to start using all the capabilities of the APIs. I'm going to take the API reference and do all the endpoints for audio, chat, embeddings, fine-tuning files, and the rest, so that we can have a base, just like the images service. We can have an interface to interact with OpenAI easily. So you don't have to deal with the authorization or to create the client or anything. You let Microprofile do the heavy lifting for you, and you just describe what you want to do. All right, so I hope you liked this video, and if you did, you know what to do. And if you want to see more videos or the follow-ups to these projects, then please subscribe, and happy coding.